What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review. This time we're going to be taking a look at The Town That Dreaded Sundown, directed by Charles B. Pierce, starring Ben Johnson and Andrew Prine. Okay, so I'm going to make this review as short as I possibly can. I don't have too much to say about this movie, so I'm going to try and just get out what I like and what I don't like. So, anyway, Town That Dreaded Sundown is based off true events that took place in 1946, where this killer terrorized Texarkana, Arkansas. And he was never, and the person behind the crimes was never found. He was never indicted on anything. They can never find him. So, what do I feel about The Town That Dreaded Sundown as a movie? I think it's fairly good. This movie bridges the gap between the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween in terms of the slasher genre. And I think The Town That Dreaded Sundown, for what it is, it's not too bad. It's pretty good for what it is. It's heavily influenced by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, taking place in that rural, southern town. It has voice narration, things like that. But unlike Texas Chainsaw Massacre, this movie has a more of a polished feel to it. It doesn't really have that. It doesn't really, to me, doesn't really have a documentary feel to it. Until you hear the voiceover, until you hear some narration and certain key points of the movie. But overall, it has a more streamlined Hollywood look to it. And that's not a bad thing at all. It looks very polished, which is fine. In terms of the production value overall, I think Charles P. Pierce did a decent job. I like the overall look of this movie. I like the 1946 aesthetic. I like how it's very detailed with the costumes and the cop cars and things like that. So I thought that stuff was great. I like the cast for the most part. Ben Johnson and Andrew Prine are the highlights for me. Charles P. Pierce is in this movie as a character called Sparkplug, who's more or less the comic relief, and I thought he was very, very funny. But there are certain instances where the comedy kind of undercuts this movie a little bit, and it kind of makes the tone of the movie a little lopsided. Because one minute you have this, you're in like this very, very overly comedic type thing, and then a couple of scenes later, you have this very intense, horrific, suspense-ridden scene happening, and the tone is very uneven. Now, comedy and horror can work if it's well implemented. If you have a character like Sparkplug who is completely over the top and his whole thing is just being comic relief, it kind of creates a disjointing tone that you're trying to go for. I understand the aesthetic that Pierce is trying to go for. He's trying to go for this, gritty documentary-like feel for this movie, but the comic relief to me kind of undercuts it a lot. Not to mention that his visuals aren't bad, because when the Phantom Killer is on screen and we see him doing his thing, the scenes are very tightly directed, very suspense-ridden. The three big highlight scenes for me are when the Phantom attacks these two kids coming out of a high school dance, and when he attacks this married couple in their house. One of those married couples is played by Dawn Wells, who was Mary Ann in Gilligan's Island. Cool to see that. And of course, the last 10 minutes of this movie is actually pretty cool too, where Deputy Ramsey, played by Andrew Prine, and Ben Johnson's character J.D. Morales are chasing the Phantom and nearly catch him and nearly kill him. So those to me are the three best directed scenes in this entire movie. Everything else in this movie is fair enough. It's good stuff. A lot of this movie is more or less the investigation part of the case, which I like. I like that takes the forefront. But like I said, you do have moments where some comedy undercuts it a little bit, and that kind of can, and that all depends on your taste and how you like your comedy implemented in horror films. Me, I like my comedy to be more straight-laced and more dry than bombastic in your face. But there are certain moments where the character Sparkplug can be more or less bombastic and in your face, and it really gives a disjointed tone for this movie. Like I said, on one hand you have really intense, creepy written scenes, and then you have this over-the-top comedic scene, which kind of makes it very, very lopsided. And I'm not really a big fan of that, especially when you're doing a movie like this, which is supposed to be more grounded in reality, and it's based off an actual case that went unsolved, and to this day is still unsolved. So that's the comedic part. Moments of it I like, moments of it I don't like, but overall I think this movie is actually very, very decent. I like the look of the Phantom Killer as well. This is the look that pretty much inspired Jason in Friday the 13th Part 2. The whole farm look with the jeans and the denim shirts and the potato sack on his head. It's a very iconic look made popular by Jason, but I like how this was the movie that inspired that initial look for Jason, and when Jason became a full-fledged character in part 2. So the Phantom Killer look, I love it a lot just for nostalgic reasons, and just where it affected me the most was in Friday the 13th. This was the movie that brought us that look first. So I like it. Because of that. All right, so when all said and done, I'm going to give The Town That Dreaded Sundown a solid 7 out of 10. It's a decent little horror movie. It's got some good things in it. Again, the comedy can undercut a lot of scenes here and there, but overall you have solid performances. You have overall good direction by Charles P. Vance. It has a good aesthetic to it, and it's very, very enjoyable. So yes, 7 out of 10 are my final thoughts on The Town That Dreaded Sundown. So, if you've seen this movie, let me know in the comment sections down below. Do you like it? Do you hate it? I would like to know. Like this video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.